Hello and good evening, and welcome to Politics 101. You know, when you hear the sound of the steel pan, or if it's Tuesday evening, it's Politics 101 time. I want to welcome everyone, wherever you're joining us from, whether it's in Guyana, it's in the wider Caribbean family, North America, Europe, anywhere in the diaspora, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to Politics 101. Of course, you join us every edition of Politics 101 for a discussion of the issues of the day. The last week has been a trying week since last Wednesday morning when we woke up to the news of the brutal murder of Orin Boston of Dartmouth and on their scribble. And that issue has been in the news ever since. And we are going to continue to keep it in the news because one of the things that we have vowed not to do anymore is to forget. To forget. Historical memory has to become part of our everyday way of life. The more we forget, the more we leave space for a repeat of the scourge. The more we forget, the more we leave space for the strange invader to come at night and to aim their guns at our dreams. The more we forget, the more we leave space for those who would want to hide behind masks, those who would like to hide behind democracy, those who would like to hide behind everything nasty that they put into their governing brew. The president, Irfan Ali, met with ministers of religion in Brooklyn and told them there was no racism in Guyana. And we have to make them defend themselves always. They must prove that there is no racism in Guyana. We've made our case. Our case has been made. It is racism, institutional racism, that was responsible for the murder of Orin Boston. Bob Marley says, "Woman over her head and cry for her son has been shot down on the street, all because of the system. Woman, hold your head and cry, for your husband was shot in front of you, all because of the system." The police force is part of the state. It's part of that power structure called the state. The police force is part of the coercive arm of the state. And the PPP government has the authority over that state. And any act that is carried out by that state, the PPP must bear responsibility for. It is not a PPP member who pulled the trigger. The trigger was pulled by a black man like Mr. Boston. But those who hold the authority over that black man, those who give the command for that squad to go kick the door down, kick down the door of Mr. Boston, belong to the government. When the Police Service Commission made promotions a few weeks ago, the Commission of Police refused refused to honor the recommendations of the Police Service Commission. And the President of the United States, as the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, approved that refusal because he has the authority to do so. If he has the authority to prevent people from being promoted, he must also take responsibility for the authority that he has over a SWAT team that went looking for contraband and came out with the body of Orin Boston. So Orin Boston is contraband. That was the contraband they were looking for. The blood of Orin Boston is on the hands of the policeman, the police force, the state, and the government that control that state. So we're going to be chatting tonight more about what has happened there. We're first going to talk with a young man who has been working very hard. He's the member of parliament in the opposition side from the Essequibo area, Essequibo Coast, the area that includes Dartmouth. I spoke with him on the day of the murder, and he was out there marshalling the forces, trying to hold the situation in check from getting out of order, informing the world of what took place. It was a few hours after the brother was killed, and we didn't know much then, but certainly almost a week later we know more. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Spread the word. It's a big show tonight. We're going to keep talking, and we're going to keep planning. I'm talking about Member of Parliament Sherwin Holder. Welcome, Mr. Holder, to your first edition of Politics 101. How are you? You have to unmute yourself.
Good night, Dr. Hines. I'm happy to be on your program this evening.
And thank you. I'm happy to have you on. I like to see young people taking up leadership positions, showing us that we are in good hands, and you are part of the young brigade. Now, tonight I want us to talk, as you know, about what happened in your region there. You're from the Essequibo Coast, right?
Yes, I am.
Specifically, where you're from?
Henrietta. I'm currently living in Henrietta.
You're currently living in Henrietta, but you're in Essequibo.
It's about 8 km from Dartmouth.
From Dartmouth, yes. Henrietta is closer to Guyana, right?
Yes.
My brother, tell us what's the latest on the ground. First of all, I assume that you've been in touch with the family of the Bostons. You've kept in touch with them.
Yes, I've been in touch, and I've been in touch with persons, family members, close friends of the family. I've actually been to Dartmouth. I'm very often in Dartmouth, so I've been following what is actually happening there over the last couple of days very closely.
All right, and that is precisely what I want you to tell us about. Tell us what you've been learning there on the ground over the last few days. First of all, what have you been learning about what happened? Tell us about Mr. Boston. What are people saying? What information is coming out on the ground?
There's a lot. There is a lot. Of course, you and I know, and the entire public know, that this is 1 week later, and we're nowhere closer to, or the police rather, is nowhere closer to resolving this issue or answering the kind of questions that you and I and the general public have. On the ground, we're learning a number of things. We're getting more information on how the operation, how the murder unfolded. We're getting a number of theories, but everything seemed to be centered around one area, if I can say put it that way. Um, what I gather here, what I gather here is that it this activity is centered around Ali's visit, the cabinet outreach.
Mhm.
That is the first thing I want to say. And that is what we've been getting in Dartmouth, out of Dartmouth, throughout the entire coast. When you chat with people, people are hearing things here and there, and they're putting bits and pieces together. So the first thing that has happened, it seems as though it's related to Ali's visit. Now, Ali was here for an outreach, a massive outreach. He was in the Pomeroon and all across the region. During that visit, he met with the private sector, key private sector players. As you know, Dr. Hines, over the last year, crime has been on the increase in Region 2 and around the country, and there are lots of reasons why crime has been on the increase. It has to do with the police force, the management, and the policies and the overreach, and that's a separate topic by itself. But the private sector meeting with Ali and others, I'm told, had to do with largely with crime. So you had a bunch of guys in a room complaining about crime and the police inaction in the region. And we suspect that it was out of that discussion that Ali was forced to make some kind of decision. He wanted action. He wanted to please the private sector. We're not sure how is it that Mr. Boston fit into this, because we know from the police themselves that Mr. Boston was not on the police radar. He was not wanted in any way by the police. During the outreach, we know that I personally know that Mr. Boston was very visible in Dartmouth. There were lots of police there surrounding Ali, and so nobody approached Mr. Boston. We don't get a feeling that Mr. Boston was fearful for his life or he was involved in any criminal activity which would have warranted him being afraid of the police, because he was in plain sight. But again, going back to the point, we're gathering on the ground that this whole fiasco began with the private sector meeting with the police. And so Ali and others, and Robeson Ben, I suspect, was pushed to do something in Region 2. And so that is how the SWAT came into play. Now, everybody on the ground, and I think largely the population is thinking now that the response seemed very extreme. What exactly the SWAT came here to do is still a question to be answered. Who exactly or authorized the operation? Ali obviously had to go back and sit with his people, and a decision had to be made, assuming that it came from Ali himself. But a decision had to be made at, to my mind, at a lower level, and so somebody had to authorize it. What the mission or what were the objectives of the unit still remains unanswered. So that is where we are in terms of what we are hearing on the ground. And once you're hearing this is the common thing that we're hearing here. So there must be some element of truth within what we're hearing here.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from you is, while Ali was there, complaints were made by the private sector of crime in the community. We know that. We also know that shortly afterwards, the SWAT team, which is a team that goes on the scene when there are high crimes, when there is expectancy of lots of violence and so forth, they came a few days later. The third thing we know is that somehow or the other, Mr. Orin Boston became a target and they entered his home and killed him. Those are facts that we know. What we have to work on now is to connect in those facts. We have to connect those facts. And for those who are paying attention to this case, that's their job. We're going to have Nigel Hughes on later on, and he's a lawyer. He understands these things. And I'll ask him to make the connection with those things. Now, has the body been released to the family?
As the information that I'm getting is that the funeral is planned. We know that the postmortem has already been conducted, and the funeral should be on Friday. I'm not aware that they are not in possession of the body. Let me put it.
Once they're beginning to plan the funeral and the postmortem is over, then the funeral is Friday. Tell me, on the first day of on last Wednesday, people were on the streets, the roads were blocked, they were burning debris. That continued on Tuesday, I think. What was the position? What happened after the people came onto the streets on Wednesday?
Well, Dr. Hines, it was very chaotic. There was lots of anger amongst the people. Some persons broke down, especially the female, and not only the female. I saw eyewitness. I think it's a cousin there on the road. He just broke down and cried, and he was yelling uncontrollably at some times, and look, this was a guy that was very, very popular within the community of Dartmouth. Everybody knew him. So it triggered that kind of response. The entire community was out there. Lots of young people, because as you know, he's a young man. He is only 29 years of age, and it's so unfortunate, Dr. Hines. But there were lots of persons out there throughout the day. A lot of anger being vented against the police in particular. In the morning, very early, as the murder, the word of the murder started to go around the community, and the people took up their position, started to burn tires and other debris on the road. The police were quickly summoned. They intervened with an intention to stop it immediately, but the temperature of the crowd, and the vast number of persons that were out there, they basically overwhelmed the police and pushed them back maybe almost a half a mile back, and they immediately set up barriers using huge boulders, other debris on the road. So there were a number of different barriers on the road. There were lots of several fires, especially down the southern end in the adjacent community, the neighboring community of Dunkel. That community is where you had a number of blockade you had there on the road. So the police and the fire service were unable, they were outnumbered, and they were unable to control the crowd. So they basically stood their distance. And that is what happened throughout the entire day and into the night. Persons were out there. At some times you had a greater crowd than other times, but generally speaking, persons were out there for most of the day, most of the night, throughout Wednesday night. Thursday morning, persons were there up to Thursday evening. And I believe it was on Thursday when the commissioner of police and a team went in. Now there there was a lot of disagreement as to whether the police force, the police leadership could go in or not. All right, but I think we had to look at balancing protest action with justice. At the end of the day, and that is what I want persons to understand. At the end of the day, the protest was merely to get justice for Orin Boston. I can't say that he will get justice. I believe that most persons are not confident that in the police force and in the government to deliver the type of justice that he deserves, he and his family. But we had to strike a balance, and so the commissioner of police was allowed to go in to speak with the family. Um, the acting commissioner, that is, he had a team. Of course, you all know that the crime chief was there and other senior police. But I was disappointed, Dr. Hines, when he went in. To me, I get a feeling afterwards that this was all sort of a PR stunt, something that was planned, because I was taken back that as he was trying to talk with the family, he went on his phone and he called Ali. And to my mind, for him to call Ali in the spur of the moment, I think it was planned. He was sent in here there to do exactly that for the show and for the PR so that Ali could look good. And I was particularly upset with that, and I think the family also was upset. The persons there, villagers, were upset. They were hurling all sort of insults at the commissioner, and so I think that caused him to abort that call. Ali was actually on the line, mind you, but I don't think he got the opportunity to say anything to the family at that point.
Okay. Okay. So after Thursday evening, after the visit of the commissioner, the protest was called off. Am I to understand that?
No, it didn't happen at that moment. It didn't happen at that moment. I think the police strategized. They saw an opening. I think they saw an opening after speaking with the family, and so I had a lot of discussion with the protesters there. Um, they had a number of demands that they wanted. They wanted to know the shooter. They wanted to know why the SWAT team was sent there, who authorized it. They wanted to that's in terms of information. They wanted the shooter to be charged. Um, they wanted the whole story. They wanted certain other basic they had certain other basic demands. And so I thought in their discussion, we had a discussion there, because I too wanted to get down to the bottom of it as to what is it that the community wants to see happen, what is it that the family wanted. And so I believe through that discussion, persons there, the police obviously had their persons planted there, and so that information got to the police very quickly, because early the very next morning, the police commander and a team, the local team here, went in and they made certain, I don't know if I can call them commitments. At least their commitments, they made certain commitments. I'm told that they disclosed the name of the shooter and the promise that the person would have been charged by Monday, or at least at the earliest opportunity. Well, today, Dr. Hines, it's Tuesday. We're at Tuesday, we're 1 week later, and we're no closer to that being materialized. And so I think it was just promises. It was just an attempt to calm down the community, calm down the crowd, because look, they know that this thing could have spread to other communities, and not only in Region 2, but it could have resurrected some protest action in Belladrum. It could have resurrected protest action across the country. And so their objective, their primary objective, was to stop the protests by any means possible. And I think that they were largely successful in doing that based on the promises that they made to the family. I'm told that an aunt went out to the community and asked that the protests be called off based on the promises that were made to the family. Now, Dr. Hines, I want the public to understand that I'm not saying that women are weak. Women are very strong. They are very strong, and in many instances, they are even stronger than men. But the entire household there, from my understanding, women were at home, not very much male home there, not very much male presence there. You had the wife there, the widow, the mother, other sisters and cousins. The entire home was filled with women, and so I think they capitalized on that, and they sent in, the commander is a woman herself, and they sent in a number of women to reach out to these women so that you could basically break them down and get them to agree to end the protest. And I think that is what brought the protest to an end, at least temporarily.
Yes.
As it is now, the father is there. I think the minister responsible for the police, with oversight for the police, he was there yesterday, and again he made some promises to the family that they would get justice. He's doing everything in his ability to ensure that an impartial investigation is done. I wish that he could expand on that. I really wish that after 1 week, the minister, Robeson Ben, could come out and tell the Guyanese public, tell the family, tell the residents of Dartmouth what exactly happened there, But he goes into the family and make these kinds of promises that, I had someone speak directly with the family just today, and the father in particular. And what I'm understanding is that after Robeson Ben's visit, they're saying that they have no confidence in what he said. Whatever he said there, it didn't make much sense to them. And because the fact of the matter is that they're no closer in getting justice for their child. And so they want to see more happening. They want to see the police charge. They want to, these questions that they have, and they are numerous. They want to see these questions answered.
As you know, the police have said that they are doing an internal investigation. The department that is responsible for investigating these matters. Some people, most people, are saying that they have no confidence in the police investigating the police, and that they want an independent investigation. What are you hearing from the family and from the people on the ground on that issue?
Naturally, you're absolutely correct. A majority of Guyanese doesn't have confidence in the police force, Dr. Hines, much less for the police to be investigating the police. We know from historically what has happened when the police is used to investigate the police. And over the last year, there are a number of cases that we could use as an example. So it is quite obvious, and that is exactly what we are hearing on the ground, that persons in the community, families, friends of Mr. Boston, prefers that an independent investigation is done. Preferably maybe an overseas organization or any organization that they would have confidence in. They don't have confidence in the the police, the office of what do you call it, the OPR, they don't have confidence in that office, in its ability to investigate the police and deliver the kind of justice that they deserve. So that is exactly what the family is saying. And that is exactly what they said to Robeson Ben. It is exactly what they said to Nigel Hoppy, the Commissioner of Police, and is exactly what they have been saying over the last week to the Guyanese people. But we know the PPP and we know how they operate. They are totally against that type of investigation, I believe, and for many reasons. Up until now, they cannot explain who exactly authorized this operation. And so, if you have an independent investigation, the facts must come out. The evidence will come out. All of Guyana will see it for what it is, And that brings me to the next point. This murder, this incident here has all the hallmarks of an extrajudicial killing. It has all the hallmarks, you know. From the beginning of the operation, the way how it was undertaken, the fact that you still cannot know who authorized it, the fact that you cannot know why is it that they went there, the fact that you cannot know why is it that you had to use the SWAT, why is it that you had to use the SWAT team, the fact that they staked out Mr. Boston's home and his business place. He has a shop. He was there. I am told his shop was open pretty late and they had a guy there staking it out. Why is it that they did not move in on Mr. Boston, arrest him right there and then, and conduct the search on his home? You didn't have to get the SWAT team to do that. The ordinary detectives, the ordinary police could have done that. How is it that they did not state clearly that they're police? We have your house surrounded. Come out with your hands up or whatever it is. Nothing can leave Mr. Boston's home. If you understand and you look at how Mr. Boston's home is constructed or how it's situated, once they would have surrounded that home, nothing could have left. Nothing could have left. Why is it that when you enter the home, you could not have said we're the police and and just arrest Mr. Boston? 3 officers barge into the room. Just hold on to Mr. Boston. Big guns pointed at him. Just arrest him. Why is it that he had to be shot? So
Yeah.
this incident has all the hallmarks of an extrajudicial killing. And what makes it even more evident is the attempt to cover up, in my opinion. There is a great attempt to cover up, and it goes all the way to the politicians, not only the police force, but straight to the politicians. It is ridiculous and absurd that the Minister of Home Affairs, up until now, 1 week later, cannot make an official statement. Those are the things that people are looking at, Dr. Hines. That is what the people, are looking at.
Thank you very much, my brother Sherwin, the opposition parliamentarian from the Essequibo Coast, giving us an update on what's been taking place there since last Wednesday. Sherwin, I'm going to have you back in a couple of days. The funeral is on Friday. Next Tuesday, I'm going to have you back to give us an update on what's going on, because as I kept saying since Wednesday, one of our weaknesses is that when these things happen, we forget them. The Henry boys were executed last year. There was a flurry of activity in the weeks after then. Once the protests were called off, we stopped talking about the Henry boys. Nigel Hughes kept giving us reports from time to time, but generally we stopped talking and we moved on to the next. issue. You know, they kicked down the door of your colleague, Christopher Jones, in merely days after they came to power. Same operation, kicked
Yes,
down the door, went
yes.
in, harassed him in front of his wife and children. Luckily, he wasn't killed, but we forgot a few days after.
So
And
quickly,
when we forget these things, then we allow space for the regime and the state to then continue to behave in the way they behave. So I pledge not to forget this issue. And so I'm going to have you back next week
I
to give
I
us a report. Go ahead.
I am hoping, I too am hoping that that persons, this is not just tossed under the rug and persons just forget about it. And Dr. Hines, you said something there just now about kicking down doors, and we can go as far back as the pre 2015 era
Yeah.
when we saw a lot of this happening. And coming into the 2015 elections, it was the PPP, People's Progressive Party, who went out there in a campaign and they told the Guyanese public that, look, if you elect the coalition, this is what would happen. Police and soldiers would kick down your door. But fortunately, we didn't see any of that during the last 5 years, from 2015 way up to 2020. We did not see any of that. As a matter of fact, we saw some positive movement from the police. We saw some positive movement. We saw a police force attempting to become professional. They knew, to my mind, they knew what the policy of the coalition
Yes.
was. And so they knew very well that they could not have done certain things or they would be made to answer to somebody. They had to answer. So the posture of the police was quite different. Also, there wasn't the kind of overreach. There wasn't the kind of, dictating to the force. There wasn't the kind of interference in the function of the force. And I believe that is the root cause of this problem.
Yes.
That is the core. That is the core of the problem. The way how the PPP government operates, and we can say so much about that. But I wanna make another point, and I think attorney at law Nigel Hughes might, he's a criminal lawyer, an experienced criminal lawyer, and he might get more into it. But I was surprised. I was surprised that they only held the shooter. I was surprised in an operation like this where you don't know who authorized it, why they went there, and all these things. Why is it that the shooter, and I've been talking to a lot of police within the system and police that have left, that are now retired. And what they're saying to me is that the entire unit should have been under close arrest. So you can get the story. You need to get the story from each of these ranks that were involved. You need to get it, because at the end of the day, you don't know what exactly happened there. So you had to interrogate each and every one of them. Now we are hearing on the ground, and I heard again that Robeson Ben himself said this to the family. I heard it from officers within the force. I've heard it on the ground amongst the people that the shooter is now saying that he don't know what happened. His gun just went off. It's the easiest excuse a police officer can make. Or anybody, as a matter of fact, who has committed a murder can say that, look, once you have a legal firearm there, the easiest thing to say that the gun just went off. And it reinforces the point that they should have locked down the entire squad and get from them all the information necessary to do a proper, an impartial investigation. And we're not seeing that. So it's flawed. It's highly flawed from the beginning, Dr. Hines.
And I will make sure I put that question to Nigel when he comes on. So again, thank you much. And Tuesday, I'm going to have you back to give us a report on what happens over the weekend. Thank you again,
Yes, thanks for having
Mr.
me, Dr.
Sherwin
Mike.
Holder, and you're very welcome. And thanking you out there for joining us this evening as we keep discussing this issue, the slaying of the young man in Dartmouth on the Essequibo coast, and keeping the issue on the front burner. It's something that we have to learn in our community. We have to stop forgetting easily. We have to develop long range memory. We have to use all the platforms at our disposal to keep our narratives of suffering on the front burner. Keep them in the open space. Brother Nigel Hughes is here, attorney at law. Some say the busiest attorney in Guyana, the busiest attorney in Guyana. Nigel, welcome, my brother, once again. The last time we talked, it was under these circumstances. It seems as if it has now become part of our day-to-day culture, and nobody knows it and sees it close up as you do. You have to go through all the evidence. You have to see all the obscenities and the nastiness in their naked fashion. Often we don't think of our attorneys as human beings too, who have to confront all of these emotions. You have to speak to the family. You have to speak to the police. How you do it, Nigel? I mean, how you do it and still keep that smile?
David, first of all, let me give you my deepest fraternal greetings, and my eternal gratitude for you, for all you do and your commitment to the struggle. You know that the struggle is one that has many fronts, and were it not for the people like yourself who are persistently reminding us of how bad and how difficult things are, and persistently reminding us that there is hope, that this is not the time to surrender. So I want to thank you for that. David, struggle is a struggle. You've been in this. You are almost like a teacher to me. You've been in this long. When I was in high school, it's just a different iteration of it, and the struggle continues for a better Guyana. And so I suspect that's probably what keeps me going, God willing.
Yes, Nigel, let's start today and work our way back, because I want to integrate tonight Boston and Peter Headley and the Henry brothers and Irish Singh into this narrative of the last year. You have heard all the questions that have been raised by the various organizations. The young man was on just now telling us about what people are saying on the ground. And the big question that everybody has asked, what was a SWAT team doing on the Essequibo coast, ostensibly looking for prohibited items?
All right, so a couple of things, David, if I could deal with this. And I do want to address this first. And it is, even if a SWAT team was on the Essequibo coast, and even if they were looking for the most dangerous criminal or wanted person alive, they did not get the right to kill that person unless he or she presented a threat. So even if the SWAT team was there on a mission, that was dangerous. They don't have the license to kill. So let's get rid of the notion that because it's a SWAT team, somehow you have to cut them slack, or that you could understand their action. And we have a very, very potent reminder. You will remember during the era of Laurie Lewis, the army and the police could not dislodge Blackie London from that building in Eccles all night. They tried everything. It was when he said, I am going to surrender and come out. And he raised his hands after getting assurances from his squaddie, Mr. McAllister, I believe, Captain McAllister at the time. Said, Blackie, where you are, I could take you, but I give you my word that if you surrender, that you will live. And as he was coming out with his arms raised, you will remember the Guyana police force executed him. So that was one of the most wanted men. And that action, even if everything you believe about Blackie was true, it did not justify the slaughter of a person who had his hands in the air and was surrendering. So we got to go back to that stage, because nobody other than God has the right to take life. Worse, if you shoot a man or a woman after you have said to them, if you surrender and you put your arms in the air, you're okay, then that's an execution. So this whole idea that somehow the SWAT gives a certain level of justification for the brutality or somehow excuses what I heard Mr. Holder just say, that some people are saying this is, they don't know how the gun went off. You don't get into the SWAT team if you don't know how the gun gets off. Secondly, a gun doesn't go off unless a finger is on a trigger. It don't go off unless the finger on the trigger. And third, if your finger is on the trigger of a weapon, it means you intend to either kill or harm. And in this particular case with Mr. Boston, this wasn't a handgun, this wasn't a 9, this was an AR-15, fully automatic weapon. This is not in your hand like this is carried like that. So I cannot imagine the circumstances in which you would enter a man's bedroom armed with an AR, with your finger on the trigger, and you didn't intend to kill him or harm him. So this notion that somehow the gun went off, the gun can't go off unless your finger's on the trigger. And you can't go into a room with your finger on the trigger unless you intend to seriously injure, especially if you're carrying an AR or you intend to kill. So I want to start off with that. The evidence in this case here is particularly damning and leads really only to murder. Let me just, if I could briefly, with your indulgence.
Yes.
Couple of things that perhaps are not widely known. When the police entered that house, the sliding door, which is a glass door, was not locked. That's the front entrance, because this was in a family compound. So they didn't even have to kick open that door. They just literally moved the sliding door aside. They came, and the first person they encountered, because she heard, was his daughter, his 7-year-old daughter. They took her and out of the house, removed her from the house, and said, we're going for your father. No. If you have a man's 7-year-old daughter and you believe he's in the house, what stops you from saying, Mr. Boston, police, come out of the room or wherever you are? They didn't do that. They didn't do that. They moved her out of the house. His door was not locked. So this is not a bedroom door that was locked. It was just pushed in. I just have to give you where the bed is against the wall where the door is. So when you push the door opens inwards. When you push the door open, you push the door against the side of the bed where Mr. Boston's head was. 3 men enter that room, and one of them fires. He's lying naked in the bed next to his wife. Now, it is a biological fact that when you get shot in those circumstances, you either defecate or urinate or both. In this case, as he was shot, he urinated himself. His wife, who was lying there next to him, felt the urine on her thigh. She was so traumatized by what happened that in her frightened state, she asked, can I leave? They allowed her to leave the room. Now, if you want independent evidence other than what the wife says, the bed evidently was wet, and I am confident that it was observed by the investigators when they went there. So you have the blood on the pillow, the blood on the sheet, the blood on the mattress, and the urine on the sheet and the mattress. Now, he could not have been shot anywhere other than lying in that bed. For him to be able to urinate on the bed where he did, the blood to be where it was, both on the sheet and on the pillow, as well as on the mattress. So there's no suggestion that he was even remotely in a position to offer any resistance. Now, you will recall, David, that the very first story that came out of the police was that this man was in a struggle with the police, tried to take away the gun. So this naked man would have had to have gotten up out of the bed, reached for a weapon, and I don't know who in their right mind will imagine that by grabbing a gun, they'll have to take out the 3 people in the bedroom and then the other persons who are outside. So this is beyond fantasy. This is a ridiculous statement. The reason why it is important is this, is that the Guyana Police Force, rather than issue a statement initially that says, there has been an awful tragedy, somebody has lost their life, we are in the process of investigating, starts off by attributing to this deceased man, where all this independent evidence shows that he was shot in his bed, that he attacked. And because of the attack, that's why he got killed. Now, you picked the last year. For terms of reference, I want to go back to Shaka Blair.
Yeah.
The start of the whole difficulties that led to everything that happened at that East Coast corridor. Shaka Blair, in almost similar circumstances, was executed in front of his wife and children, unarmed, by a squad of special police officers. And that, my friend, started the history of things that some of us prefer not to remember. Dartmouth, and I say this with the greatest respect to every other part of this country, the Essequibo Coast has been the most peaceful coast. They are the most peaceful communities, whether it's Indian, African, or indigenous. They have never been caught up either in the sort of burning and spontaneous reaction that we have seen. At one time, there was a problem between the paddy growers and they blocked the road. But Essequibo Coast does not have this history. The people of Dartmouth didn't wait for some politician. They didn't wait for some human rights activist. They didn't wait for any activist at all. They were so outraged at this execution in their village that they immediately, without any prompting, nothing to do with race, nothing to do with anything other than, we had enough. You are not taking one of our sons like this. And so they got up and they continued to protest. It is the beginning. Unlike other cases, the police have a habit of suggesting that maybe they're going to institute charges for manslaughter so the police officer can get bail. Well, on the evidence of the wife and on the independent evidence, the urine in the bed, the blood in the bed, the blood in the sheets, the blood in the mattress, it is clear that this is murder. And the family have been gracious enough to allow the police at least 10 days to conduct their investigation. If they are incapable of instituting charges for murder, they have the option of bringing private criminal charges for murder. Now, the Director of Public Prosecutions has the power, if she has the lawful basis, to withdraw those charges. But it would be difficult given the evidence that exists, both independent evidence and the evidence of the eyewitness, which is his wife who was lying in the bed, the basis upon which she would seek to withdraw the institution of charges brought by the family themselves if the police failed to charge for murder. It would be, I dare say, a most telling development if that were to happen.
Attorney at law Nigel Hughes giving us the gruesome description there of the gruesomeness of the crime.
David, let me just add one.
Yeah.
If you thought that was bad enough, after they shot this man, his wife came out of the bedroom. They lifted his body, rested it on the concrete outside, and then went to search the house. No attempt to offer any medical treatment, no attempt to offer any form of life-saving activity. They left him and then ransacked the house, found nothing, which means that their intelligence had to be poor. Because if your intelligence said that this man was conducting some sort of activity, you would at least have found a spliff. You would have found something, instruments used to do something else, if it's narcotics, if it's weapons. You found nothing, which is not only an indictment on the intelligence that they receive, but it's also an indictment on the way in which they treat people after they have shot them. They offer no medical attention, leave you lying as if presumably that you're dead. A man that they thought they had shot in their hand, if you believe their story. So if you shoot a man in the hand, you leave him lying there and offer no medical attention. That's a really bad place to be as a country. And his 7-year-old daughter was removed from the house and was present when her father was executed. Been a rough stage.
Very, very, very rough stage. Nigel, the police has said that the Office of Personal Responsibility is what they call it. Professional responsibility. The Office of Professional Responsibility would be carrying out an investigation. First of all, what record does that office have in matters like these? They obviously have carried out investigations before on similar matters. What's the track record?
Okay, let's start off by saying this is a department of the Guyana Police Force.
Yeah.
This is a department that comes under the Commission of Police. And at the end of the day, their salaries are paid by the Guyana Police Force.
Yeah.
You know what they say about the piper in the song, the tune?
Yes.
Good. The reputation of the Guyana Police Force, particularly the Special Weapons and Tactical Team, is on the line here because we all know what's on the line. Are we looking at Buxton too? So the police have a vested interest in protecting their reputation first, and they have demonstrated that by the first press release they made. The man was attacking them and all of this, but there's no evidence to support it. What confidence are you going to have if I come to you and say, David, your son behaved badly and he beat up my daughter? And the first thing you said, without any evidence, why someone do that to you? How are you going to do that? And then I said, David, it's okay. You can investigate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is precisely the same case. If you start off by saying, my son would never do that, rather than let me investigate and ask him what happened, you have already indicated to me, if I have taken the time to come and to say to you, David, as an fellow elder, your son has mistreated my daughter. You, without even attempting to find out the facts and circumstances, say to me, Nigel, you're lying. Impossible. How am I going to repose any confidence in you if you afterwards say, why, Nigel, I ain't so sure. Let me investigate. I'm not going to have it. So the Office of Professional Responsibility, you asked about their track record, and I will only ask this question in response. If they can name me one single case in which they have secured a conviction against a police officer for murder, I would say, yes, you have done your work. And I have represented Shaquille Grant's estate and his mother, where 7 young men were put on the ground by another squad of the Guyana Police Force, executed while they are lying on the ground. Shaquille Grant's hands behind his head, lying face down, bang, kill him. No conviction. As a matter of fact, one of the police officers in that squad was subsequently killed when he was involved in an armed robbery of a supermarket in the East Coast. So my only response to you is, name me the single case where the Office of Professional Responsibility has secured a conviction for murder where policemen have been so charged. And it's rare that they charge policemen with murder. In Shaquille Grant, they didn't have a chance. They didn't have a choice, sorry. The evidence was so bad.
Mr. Holder asked me to raise with you the question of arresting just the shooter while the other members of the team that went in there were not similarly treated, whether that is normal or not.
I don't know if normal, I'm not sure that normal is a term I would use in relation to the actions of the Guyana Police Force, but what I would say is this. I'm not so concerned with whether they were detained per se, because you could detain people, keep them for 72 hours, do nothing, and then they go. So the detention is not an issue for me. The question is, what was the nature of the investigation that they conducted immediately after the shooting? Because there are many issues, and Mr. Holder raised them, you have raised them, everybody's raising them. A SWAT team where a man has no record, no track record of any sort of criminal conduct. Even if you got intelligence, you would have figured that the intelligence would be reliable enough and borne out somewhere. None of this has happened. So if you send a SWAT team, I would assume that the highest levels of standard operating procedures would obtain, particularly where you already have evidence that there were young people in the house, because the first person they met is the daughter.
Doctor.
So if you go into a location and there are young people, you would assume that extreme caution would be exercised, because you don't want to be in a position where you may injure some other young person and your intelligence doesn't tell you who else is in the house. So having got the most obvious indication that they were innocent people in the form of the daughter present, what circumstances would justify, what standard operating procedures would justify the level of reckless disregard? Because he would have intelligence that he was in the house with his wife. And if you didn't see the wife anywhere else, chances are that she was in the bedroom. So what precautions were you taking not to shoot her? It's absolutely mind-boggling from every possible perspective.
So, Nigel, where are we now procedurally? What next? What next procedurally?
We visited the family on Saturday. We also spoke to the commander. The father of Mr. Boston and I visited with the commander. And they anticipate that the investigation should have been concluded either by today or latest tomorrow. So I would expect by Friday that those aspects of the investigation are concluded and the charges would flow. The funeral is on Friday, I believe. So I'm expecting by Friday that would happen, because this is a case where you've got the witness, the wife. It's not difficult. The forensic show that he urinated himself, that is corroborated by the wife, and then it was on the actual sheet and mattress. The weapon was an AR-15. You already have the warhead. So what would justify the use of such a high-powered rifle in that sort of a hunting rifle, really, in a bedroom? Because you can't, if you discharge an AR at a person at less than 6 feet, the prospects for minimal injury are slim. This is not a handgun. I mean, this is a weapon that takes out, pretty sturdy animals. So I would hope that by Friday, the institute charges. I anticipate, given the police, they're going to try to perhaps institute charges for manslaughter. I don't know on what basis. I would assume now that they have the technology, that the interview with the officer and officers was conducted in audio and video recorded. We know that some law enforcement agencies can, when they arrest, are equipped with body cameras. I don't know why they didn't have them on them, unless they had some ulterior motive that evening. So, but I certainly believe all the evidence that is necessary to institute charges is already in their possession, statements already taken, and that there's more than sufficient evidence to commence proceedings for murder against the person or persons involved.
Nigel Hughes, the attorney at law for the Boston family in this case, the attorney at law for the families of other cases. Let's skip back across the coast to the other end, West Bobis, the Henry Boyce case that you've been integrally involved with. Only a week, just over a week or so ago, you were there in that community, marking the first year anniversary of those the discovery of the bodies of those young men. The village apparently has erected a monument to remember the young men and the slains. And you gave a sort of an update of where things are 1 year later. So I'm going to impose on you here a little bit because we have our society is sometimes always in a hurry, partly because things happen every day. And 1 year seems like a long time, but give us a background to the Henry case, all those permutations with the arrests and who were charged and who were released. Even for somebody like myself, who's taking, need a refresher sometimes. Over to you.
I think, David, this emphasizes the point that you were making at the end of Mr. Holder's interview, which is that quite often we don't remember. And it's perhaps because we are so frequently inundated with tragedy upon tragedy upon tragedy upon tragedy that after a while, I think as a natural reaction, our body, our brain says, like you said the other night, because I heard you in your program when you were by yourself, say that enough is enough, that this here is beyond anger. This is beyond rage. And the question really is, how does one react to this? I'm going to come to the Henrys, but imagine if and I just want to give context to this. If bandits came in somebody's house, prominent politician in the government, and executed somebody like this, and took nothing, police didn't find anything, they didn't take anything, bandits come and execute you, they would be absolute outrage.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, every possible resource that the Guyana police force has would be dedicated towards finding those persons, because it would be so awful and horrendous a blow to the society that if this happened, the bandits come in and absolutely execute somebody like that of prominence, all the resources of the Guyana police force and probably internationally would be accessed. In identical circumstances, except it's not the bandits, the police come in and execute the person in their bed, lying next to their wife, in the sanctity of their home, where they haven't even locked their home because their compound is so secure. What resources were activated? What resources were activated? None. So I only put that out there for the purposes of comparison. And if we want to have a just society, we have to start asking ourselves, is it just justice for one set of the society, or is it justice for everybody? To come to the Henrys, as you know, a year ago, these two boys had their necks severed, and their bodies were dumped in the back dam of number 3 on the west coast of Belize. From the beginning, from the absolute beginning, the family said, we want a professional forensic investigation. We want that because it is important that we get the right people. The families have their suspicions. I believe they're almost confirmed in their belief as to who committed these crimes. But they said from the beginning, let us have a fair forensic professional examination. The other thing they said is, we don't want you to bring some confession statement to us and tell us that John Smith and Mary Brown and Jamil Singh or somebody confessed, because that's not the basis. Because the easiest thing with a confession is you contradict it with independent evidence. Those people rose up demanding nothing else but justice. All that activity that took place was merely a cry for justice. They weren't crying for anything else. They were crying for justice. When everybody was outraged, funds were raised to bring not the best in the Caribbean, not the best in South America, the best forensic evidence experts globally at no cost to the state to help investigate this so that we could nail the people who are responsible. That offer was not only refused, the man, Dr. Thunderboy, came here and he was insulted. He didn't go with me to see the Minister of Home Affairs. He went with Mike McCormack from Guyana Human Rights Association. And the Minister of Home Affairs, in short order, told him no thank you. So one of the questions you ask yourself is, why would you refuse help that you don't have to pay for from the best forensic evidence experts in the world? You got to have a reason for that. I mean, if somebody comes to you and says, David, here, boy, I'm willing to pay for your kids to go to Harvard and give you the best education, and no, they don't have any scholarship, no obligations, and you refuse, people would ask in those circumstances why. Here is where you had two bad murders at a bad time, because it was the middle of a political season and it was the middle of heightened racial tension in the society, because all our elections are race censuses. And you have two African youths slaughtered in the middle of an election or in the election difficulties. And the state does not even accept an opportunity to get the best outside help to solve this. Every effort made by this family just to get justice is thwarted. They are going home after they met Dr. Thunderboy, and Gail and her son are arrested and beaten in the Sparendam police station. And then if that was not enough, they got charged to go to court the next day. The charges got dismissed the other day. So imagine, here we don't remember the night the pictures went on social media, you saw the bloodied face of Colin, and then you saw the mother that fainted and passed out. She actually had to be taken to the hospital. Those charges are dismissed. Nothing happens, and then they find the three most unlikely people to offer who says they confess to murdering these boys. You just have to look at these boys and look at the deceased and know that there's no way them boys could have any way held down any of those deceased, one, let alone two, and killed them. It ain't happening. It's like asking me to say that I hold on Mike Tyson and tie him up and chop his neck in a confrontation. I mean, seriously, even if I'm taller than Mike Tyson, it ain't happening. So if that is what you're going to bring to the grieving relatives and to the already suspicious population who believe that this might have been politically connected, it means you clearly, if all you're going to bring to them is confessions from three very, very fragile, frail-looking persons, and say that they somehow held down these boys and chopped them, and one of the deceased didn't even have defensive wounds, then it means you have no regard to the intelligence of the nation. Because you would have to be on some other planet to believe that these two guys could possibly have held down, killed, and chopped and severed the necks of these chaps. It was so ridiculous that even the magistrate dismissed one of the charges because all they had was some confession of one of them. They persist with challenging our intelligence by saying they're going to bring back the charges. Not a single piece of scientific evidence. They then arrest the sons of this family and say that, look, on the day that Harris Singh was murdered, which is a few days later, you are the people that did it. The women who were present when some of these boys were in the house, it was the day of 2 or 3 days after they were cooking, as we normally do after a murder, and the families gathered to help ease the pain of the murder, cooking in the yard, said that, look, this chap was here with us all morning. He ain't left and go anywhere. So he couldn't get to number 3 village, to murder any Harris Singh. And they come from West Coast police, all of them, women. They arrive at the police headquarters. You know what they greeted with? 15 to 16 police officers with video cameras who videotape them for the next 7 hours. All they do is stood up in their face and videotape them. And you would ask yourself, if the police have the resources to send 16 and 17 men to video record 7 and 8 witnesses, females, for an entire afternoon. Why that same level of commitment could not have been demonstrated in the investigation. And then they put them on prohibited bail. They go into the lockup. Fortunately, and I will always say this for Guyana, some of our citizens still have a sense of justice. And they went into their pockets and they contributed to raising that $800,000 on a Friday night cash, which otherwise, if it had not been raised, would have resulted in these women being charged. And so a year later, we are nowhere closer to having a credible, the institution of credible charges for the murders of either Harrison or the two Henry boys. So whichever side of the political fence you are on, what has happened and what has been fed to us is unacceptable.
What you were there, Nigel. I played your speech to that event. What are people saying? You have the ear of an attorney. You're a keen observer of the society. You obviously have to be. What is your sense of the morale of the people? What are they saying in West Belize?
David, it's more than West Belize. It's the country. The country is at a stage now. It is highly flammable. It is literally, if you even look as if you're going to light a match, Guyana will explode. And to me, it is simply a matter of time. So when you ask me about the mood in this country is so, I don't know how to put this in a decent sense. The mood in the country is so potentially volatile. People, the race relations are the worst since I have been alive. I'm talking about the visible race relations.
Yeah.
I mean, we have been through bad times. We've been through times when people were fighting against dictatorship. We've been through times when people are fighting for elections. We've been through times where there have been treason trials against people like Arnold Rampersad. We've been through a lot of difficult times in this country. Dr. Rodney got killed. We've been through difficult times. I have never in my life seen the race relations as bad as they are. I'll only say this. In any country in which there is ethnic fraction between two major parts of the population, and there is dissent and exclusion, the results are inevitable. You can look at South Africa, you could look at wherever you want to look at. It is inevitable that we are going to reach the breaking point. Depending on who you listen to, it's close, maybe not so close. And no amount of oil money, no amount of platitudes, nothing is going to arrest the situation unless this country is mature enough to sit down and have a real discussion about race, economics, and what we really want for the future. And in that discussion, we have to be candid. If it is that we have reached the stage that we don't think it is possible in unity, then let's have a discussion, because at least we have some common principles we accept: justice, rule of law, all those things. But I have never seen us this bad. And I really do fear for the future of this country.
And I want to endorse that, Nigel. I want to endorse that often because people like myself and yourself we are always sitting ducks to be blamed for inflaming things. We are often cautious about saying what you have said there candidly, because that is easily flipped by the other side. Nigel Hughes is preaching that violence and so on.
Not at all. Not at all. Let me, if I could take the opportunity, let me say this without reservation. Violence is not going to solve this, because at the end of the battle, if you had an army of 100 and you're left with an army of 2, you still have to sit down and talk.
Yes.
So, and the people that get hurt in violent uprisings are the poor people, children.
Poor people.
Always the poor people, children. So violence is not the solution to this. If we are smart we will have the conversation now. But inevitably, we will speak. We can speak now, or we can speak after the tragedy. But speak we will. And that's the history of every single area of conflict. The clerk wasn't going to speak to Mandela. He wasn't speaking to the African National Congress, but he had to speak to them. It came after many deaths.
Yeah.
You pick your country, Pakistan, India, wherever. You got to speak. Whether it's nations, whether it's races, whether it's ethnicities, at the end of the day, ask the Irish. Dedicated their lives. Ask the Irish.
Yep.
You got to speak. You got to come to an accommodation. And I was hoping that as a people, we were mature enough to appreciate that.
Yeah. Nigel, Peter Headley, that's a case that gets lost because it's sandwiched there in between all of the cases. And I know it's a case that you're familiar with, but what's the update on that case?
You know, I have to confess, I am not as up to date in that, and I wouldn't want to leave information that may not be particularly accurate. So I'll ask that you forgive me on this because I really am not up to speed on Peter Headley. But so I don't want to mislead your listenership by making any pronouncements or offering any comments in it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's all right because it's a case that gets lost in between all the other high-profile cases. You know, I reference the Chris Jones case, a similar, breaking into his home. His wife and children are there. This business of harassing and executing people, men, in front of their wives and children. Any thoughts on that, Nigel?
You know, any execution is bad. If you are decent and you're in the business of killing people, illegal as it may be, you will attempt to do it in circumstances which are unless you're sending a message. And invariably, you're not sending a message to the family, you're sending a message to somebody else, like gang members or what have you. It has to be the act of greatest cowardice that you would execute a man, invariably a man, but woman as well, in front of their family. Because the offspring of that person will never forget you, and invariably they will always come after you. They'll wait until they get bigger. They'll wait. But when the opportunity comes, they will not accept it. That's just life. It happens. And we can say and preach about, an eye for an eye makes everybody blind. But if you execute my father in my presence when I'm a young man or a young girl, I am not likely to forget it. And with the best will in the world, God willing, I would like to believe that revenge could not consume me, but I am, after all, human. And I will leave it there.
Nigel, the police are always in the spotlight in any society across the world, given the fact that the police are part of an institution that are charged with law and order. Here
Protecting
in
Guyana. Protecting and service.
Protecting and service. Yes, protection and service. And we have been through, as you cited earlier, rough moments in Guyana. But the impression is that if you go back to 1992 to 2015, 2015 to 2020, and then post 2020, the police seems to behave differently depending on who controls the government. Is that a valid observation? And if so, what do you think is percolating there, under there?
Okay. as a general rule, and I'm not going to the politics here.
Yeah.
Law enforcement agencies like police behave with impunity where they think they can get away with it. And that applies to any government.
Yes.
If they have the coverage, if they feel they have official coverage, they will behave with impunity. And we have a long history of Guyana, of various squads in the Guyana police force behaving with impunity. We had the Quick Reaction Group back in the day, towards Mr. Burnham's era. Afterwards, there was another Quick Reaction Group, which is Ivleri, used to behave with impunity. People got executed, people got raped, even in the police station, people got raped. And there were no consequences. And once you have a system that does not sanction criminality, people will do it. The question then is, what does the data suggest? Where have we seen the greatest or the more frequent acts of behavior in which the various forces in the police, various parts of the police force behave with impunity? And you have to look at the data. So anything without data is really just a rhetorical discussion. And I think if we are going to look at the Guyana Police Force as an institution, analyze what its problems are, because we've had several commissions. We had the Granger Commission, I think, with Chang and various people. Is at the end of the day, we need a law enforcement agency that is unbiased, but more importantly, enjoys the confidence of the entire nation. One of the problems we have in an ethnically divided society in which there's an overwhelming number of African people in the police force is that you start with a natural challenge from other ethnicities, because there's a perception that the police force, so if the police turn up and the potential suspect is of another ethnicity, it's going to be a natural suspicion that the police force will have a bias. You can only remove that sort of instinctive behavior if you have standard operating procedures and where you have accountability. So every time you have an execution, a death, an allegation, it is investigated partially. Both the investigation and the results are made known to the nation, and those organizations that track that sort of information publicize it. So we must feel that, when it happens, it happens. This also has to apply to the economic front. So I'm not saying this is just
right. Yeah.
So on the economic front, when a particular ethnic group always keeps getting the contracts, that has to be investigated. We can't possibly talk about living in a multi-ethnic community and have that level of impunity and level of opaqueness and level of lack of scrutiny of the conduct. So when you ask me that question, I would say I have my views on it, but I would prefer to present my views when I'm backed by the data. To say,
by the data, yeah.
Between 78 and 85, we had 76 executions, and we had 75. We had 76 cases of nobody charged in the Guyana Police Force. We pick another year, we go through it, so that we can begin to disaggregate the data, so we can begin to get the pointers of what is the impunity and how the impunity operates. And therefore, we have to target that impunity whenever it happens. So, in a case like this, if whoever it is that did the shooting of Boston gets charged with murder, the rest of the squad is going to understand that they don't have no coverage. So when they're going to do somebody dirty work, understand that you can get charged and you can sit down in the jail, because you have to remove the impunity. And that is what happens. And once that happens, you start to get a more professional law enforcement agency, because the little constable who the man upstairs saying, buddy, I got your back, I can cover you. And when you do what he wants you to do and you get no coverage, you're not going out there. The rest of the squad ain't going out there to execute nobody child. Yeah. Because they know they got to sit down in the jail.
Yeah, deterrence. Yes. Nigel, we are coming down to program time, and
sure.
It's a dread time for Guyana. It's a dread time for African Guyanese communities. They have to bury their dead. Their women have to be wailing and so forth. And their men, I have wept privately and lost it on last Wednesday. I wept publicly because I am a black man in Guyana. I've been seeing this, observing it, crying, wailing for it all my life. And I've just reached that point where I'm thinking the best justice is that we have to have a clean slate, and that we've got to work for it. These kinds of slayings um, can engender kind of hopelessness among people, and I've part of my not crying anymore is I'm going to dedicate part of what I do to giving people hope. I think Eddie Grant, Give Me Hope, Joanna, comes to mind. Nigel talked to the people who are in this audience tonight who have been very grateful for the information and the analysis that we have given them. Talk to them and give them some hope. Give them some hope.
David, I will say the first commitment to everybody who listens is truth. And truth means that I can't give you, or I wouldn't attempt to give you, false hope. What I would say is I lean on my ancestors who have seen far more challenging circumstances in the history of our people than we face today, and who are in far more hopeless conditions than we face today, whether it was at the bottom of a ship or in the fields of a sugar plantation or a cotton plantation. And in their darkest hour, they knew that the light was going to come. Some of them didn't see it, but they knew it was going to come. I lean on the struggle of the Jewish people before, when they didn't have a home, etc., and they understood and they felt that they couldn't have a home. Guyana may seem hopeless today to large parts of this population on many fronts. This is not just the front in which people are being killed, it's on the economic front, it's on the political front, and we may think that there is an absence of capable and appropriate leadership to solve this problem. What I will say is that the problem will get solved. It is the price of the ticket. It is the price of the ticket. And if our leaders are wise, they will understand that there is no victory capable in a situation like this. You will have no victory. It will be, in the words of Robert Nesta Marley, a fleeting illusion. It is no victory. This year, we have to sit down and talk soon. And if we don't do that, we are going to end up exactly where everybody predicts we will end up. We will lose our relatives. Our people our adversaries will lose their relatives. And the question is going to be, for what reason and for what cause? And by the time we pick ourselves up after the battle, we will discover that that which we were fighting for is no longer ours, because we have surrendered the entire legacy that all the peoples in Guyana have struggled to give us. I leave it there, my friend.
Well, Nigel, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. I know you're a very busy man, and I don't call on you very often, but I'm very glad that you answered the call today and to come and to share not just information but perspective with us, because it's all part of the struggle for justice. And so thank you very much, my brother. Thank you.
I just want to say, you can call on me. Thank you. And I want to applaud your relentless efforts on behalf of a better Guyana. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Nigel. And thank you, the audience, for staying with us. We're going to see this through. We're going to see this through. Some of us are prepared to stand tall and stand firm. to see this through to the end. We will do it in our own different ways. Some of us will scream loud. Some of us will be a little bit more subdued. But as Martin Carter says, this I've learned today, expect tomorrow a hero. Hero, a monster you're consumed. Like a jig shakes the loom, like a web is spun the pattern. All of us are involved, all are consumed. And so I'm arrogant enough to say that I'm going to play my part. I will continue to play my part as my brothers and sisters who do this and other service to the nation are doing. I'm going to continue to play my part, and I want you to stay with me, stay with us. The times may be hard. It may seem as though there's no light at the end of the tunnel. Our leadership, as we know it, may not be up to scratch. But when you don't get mama, you so granny. When you don't get mama, you so granny. If our elected leadership are not up to scratch at the moment, then the rest of us have to pitch in. We have to pitch in and we have to play our role. And so without you, there is no me. Without you, there is no me. I do this because I think we've got to do it. We've got to raise our voices, Dr. King said, on the eve before he was shot to death by another gunman in another part of the world, Memphis, Tennessee. He was there in solidarity with the workers, the garbage collectors, the working people, giving them solidarity in their strike for better wages. And on the night before he was murdered, he said, I've been to the mountaintop and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but we as a people will get there. We have made sacrifices. We've lost the lives of the Dr. Kings and the Malcolms, of the Walter Rodneys and the Crummy Wings and the Waddles here in Guyana. They have been to the mountaintop and they've seen the promised land. They're not going to be physically here to get there with us, but to be as a people will get there. We're going to beat this. We have to beat this calamity. We have to beat it. And if we're to beat it, we've got to put our shoulders to the wheel always. We've got to ask questions and we've got to make demands. We have to do a little bit more than we are doing. And just a little bit more. And tomorrow, do a little bit more. I'm always thankful to you for staying with us these evenings. You know, the wake is a constant thing. We are keeping duty. We're keeping our wakes for our deads. We're staying in the open space because there was a time when we could not be in the open space. We could not speak the open word. So stay with us. And sometime in the very near future, I hope, we will look back on these days and say, the investment was worth it. The investment. We are investing in our own peace, in our own future, in our own justice. By staying on the front line. Stay on the front line. Stay on the front line because this is a war at various levels. Stay on the front line. Good night. I'm gone. My day's not over yet. I got some other things to do for the rest of the evening to contribute to our struggle. But again, good night. I want to thank Desiree from England for our contribution to keeping this program not only on air here, but on broadcast TV. We have got to pay Channel 9 to keep it out there so that our mothers and our fathers, our daughters and sons who do not have access to Facebook, who may not be able, they may not have the credit to buy the time to come on, but they have a TV in their homes so they can be part of this offering. And I want to thank Desiree. And there are a couple of other people to thank. I didn't look at the list before I came on this evening, but I want to thank you all for your donations, for your subscription. Desiree was particularly on the ball, doing everything that she could do to make sure that our donation gets to us. It's the kind of sacrifice, it's the kind of gesture from our people that fills me up with emotions, that I come from a people of substance. I come from a people who are dedicated to their own justice and their own freedom. I thank you. Good night.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.